Hello, everybody. What's good to all my universal people and those in galaxies near and far? Welcome to the Universal Dialect Show. I'm your host, Chris Cipher 73 Cabrera. This is show number 34. I want to welcome a returning guest. He's a sports analyst, managing editor for justbaseball.com, and host of the awesome podcast Locked on Mets, the only daily podcast on the New York Mets. I'd like to welcome returning guest Ryan Finklestein. How you doing, my man?
Doing good, doing good. Fired up for start of another season. So excited about opening day this week.
Yeah, me too, brother. It's been too long, but you were on episode 14. That was last October 5th, and a lot has happened since then. Um, First off, you got engaged, and I don't know if you got married yet. Are you married yet, or are you still
Uh,
in the
at
engagement
the end
process?
of next month, April
Okay,
29th.
congratulations, my man.
Thank you.
To start off kind of on a sour note, the last time we talked, the Mets handed over the division to the Braves pretty much. Um, we went to the wild card to play against a stacked San Diego, and we didn't make it out of that. So the first question is, and you don't have to go into depth, but what was the reason for the meltdown those last couple of months?
I think you look back and September was rough, obviously. Starlin Marte going down was a big reason why I think the Mets ultimately lost the division. I think if you have Marte, you figure the fact that they ended up tying with the Braves, I imagine they win at least one more game if they had Marte aboard. But I think there was something that kind of psychologically, it seemed like just was different after they clinched. I don't know, clinched the playoffs. I mean, where they didn't celebrate it and they were just trying to make that push and they couldn't seal the deal. And I think the fact that they didn't seal the deal, it kind of led to maybe a little bit of doubt as they got to October. And it never felt like it was going to come together and they were going to make a deep run. It kind of felt like a defeatist attitude, in my opinion, that entire weekend. It was just a weird playoff series. So I think it was a good learning experience for that team. You come back different. I think they're a little bit better. And we'll see if they can navigate the season better and finish stronger. I think that's kind of the most important thing. Maybe not to get so tired with the season as you see a Phillies team where the Phillies let the Mets and the Braves beat up on each other. And then come the playoff time, they were just playing carefree and they ended up making that run.
Right. And would you attribute the depth also? Because I mean, I know we picked up Ruff, Vogelback, but I mean, to me, those weren't strong enough like pickups. But I mean, I guess if that was available, that's what they had to do. But I didn't like the depth that we had either.
Yeah, I think down the stretch, and Marte's injury kind of, brought it to the surface more because suddenly you're weaker against left-handed pitching. That's one big part of it. And two, Tyler Naquin's getting out there a lot, and their outfield kind of got thin. So I do think that like Vogelback was a nice addition, but you look at the team last year and you compare it to what they have now, you're pretty much rolling the same team with like Tommy Pham and Omar Narvaez. I think the question is, last year is probably premature for the kids to step up. We saw all of them, but it was probably premature. The question this year is, when will you see Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, and Francisco Alvarez? And can those guys kind of take the team over the top? Or is this a team that didn't get Correa that still needs to make that big splash to find that extra bat at the deadline?
All right, cool. Well, all right, so we're gonna get into all the Beatty, Vientos, and all that stuff. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, because then after that, obviously then the off season kicks in, and then you have the winter meetings, so on and so forth. Um, I never thought I could imagine a team without deGrom. So,
Yeah.
in your wildest dreams, what were your thoughts on that? That whole thing, the deal, and just go ahead and say what you gotta say.
It was, it's rough because it's funny when deGrom was a Met, you spent all the time kind of defending it, like defending the fact that he wasn't available, and then he leaves. Justin Verlander comes in, and now it's like, okay, well, we see the vision, right? We see what they were trying to do. They kind of knew that they had Verlander in their back pocket. 2 years of Verlander is a lot less risky for a franchise than 5 years of deGrom. At the same time, if Jacob deGrom proves to be healthy this year, that does still suck. Like it could be both things. The Mets could be better off in the long run. It could have been the smart decision to make. And it still sucks seeing Jacob deGrom pitch in a Rangers uniform. I think it, so when it happened, obviously, as a Mets fan, I was devastated to see, oh, come on, like that guy's not going to finish career at the Mets. Like that sucks. But then 48 hours later, Verlander's a Met, and you got Scherzer and Verlander, and now Kodai Senga, and you're still excited about this season. So I
Right.
think it goes both ways.
Yeah, and the fact is DeGrom still injured? Because I know he injured himself in spring. So do you know if he's going to
He's
make his start?
It looks like he's. I don't know if he's going to make it opening day per se. I haven't seen if the Rangers announced that, but he's not going to start the season on the injured list. I don't think. I think he'll be whether he might be kind of ramping himself up and might be 70 pitches early. It seems like that little hiccup he had at the start of spring didn't result in anything. But again, the
Right.
fact that he had a hiccup and Justin Verlander's throwing 90 pitches. That kind of shows you the difference where I think the Mets are more confident that this year they're going to get 50 plus stars from Scherzer and Verlander than they would be to enter the season with Scherzer and deGrom.
Right. All right. So those fans that don't go as deep as like let's say you and I, um, you just wake up one day and DeGrom's not on the team. You don't know that there was like this sort of negotiation process. How did that process go down? Because as far as I know, the Mets tendered him a deal, then the Rangers did, and then I don't know if the Mets came back with another one. If he just went and he just signed with the Rangers, how did that whole thing go down? Do you know?
So it's tough for me to speak on it as if I'm reporting because I don't have any information on it, but I can tell
Right.
you kind of my take on it based on the tea leaves that were left, right? And so if I remember the numbers correctly, the Mets side offered him like a 3-year, $120 million deal. I do know that number came in less than what Max Scherzer got, right? The Rangers come over the top with the 5-year offer, and the Mets were never going to go that far with the amount of guaranteed money that he got. So whether he approached the Mets and said, here's my offer, will you match it or not? He was getting from the Mets side that they were looking short term on it. Jacob deGrom gets a franchise in the Rangers that really try to woo him to come in. They wine him and dine him. They show him how much he means to them, that he's the piece that's going to legitimize their franchise. And ultimately, I think he decides that that's the better offer. That's the team that's more aggressive in pursuing me. So, I think that the Mets would have been happy for deGrom to return, but it just doesn't really feel like they were going that extra mile to say, "Hey, you're our guy." We want to see 48 retired, and I don't think they went that far to sign him, and it's probably because after 2 years of him not being available enough to them, there was probably a sour taste in the mouth a little bit. And when you have a chance to get a guy that pitched to a 1.75 ERA last year and won a Cy Young and get him on a short term deal, I think the Mets got what they wanted ultimately.
Right. Right. And then also like DeGrom and his personality, and maybe you agree or disagree, but I felt like eventually he was going to sour on being in New York, and he would
Yeah,
want to go
yeah.
to a team that just is not much in the spotlight.
I think if the New York Mets offer Jacob deGrom 5 years and 138 or whatever the exact number was, and that was their first offer, Jacob deGrom would still be a Met. I really do
Mm.
believe that. But I also think that Jacob deGrom is probably relieved to be living in Texas, to be, out of the spotlight, and he just gets to relax and, who knows? I mean, not it's not going to be competing because Jacob deGrom is an incredible competitor, but relax from the pressure a little bit, just go out and do his thing. And I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Jacob deGrom won a Cy Young this year. I mean,
Yeah, it
if
would
he
be
makes 30 starts, I
right,
think he's the Cy Young in the American League.
right, right. Because I mean, who's his competition? I mean, even Severino is down from what I heard yesterday. They
I
they
mean,
they
like,
announced that he's
I
down.
think Shohei is probably gonna the contract. Like, if Shohei stays in the American League, he's one. There's a couple guys, Garrett Cole maybe, but Jacob deGrom's healthy. Jacob deGrom's still the best pitcher in baseball, and so when it comes to October, you know that might be the one time a year where Verlander doesn't show up. You might be kind of regretting this one, but I think throughout a majority of this season, Mets fans will be pretty happy with Justin Verlander.
Word up, man. All right, so let's get into like some of the off-season moves. So after the whole fiasco with the DeGrom thing, then the Mets kicked into gear and they started making some decisions. So here's some of the moves that they made. Nimmo at 8 years at 162 mil. Edwin Diaz, Rest in peace. 5 years, 102 mil. Verlander, he got 2 years, 86.6. We signed this individual from Korea, which not many people really knew about. He didn't start really gaining like in the middle of the season when they started talking about like, free agent signings and international. That's when the Kodai Senga's name started to really generate buzz. But he got 5 years at 75. We picked up lefty Jose Quintana at 2 years, 26. And then we picked up some catching depth at Omar Narvaez at 2 years, 15. What are your thoughts on these moves? And do you approve on some of them? Don't approve, like the numbers or the years? What are your thoughts?
Well, I really like what they did with their own guys. I like, I mean, obviously the Edwin Diaz now we can look back on it, but that was a little bit of a freak injury. So I think that Edwin Diaz, that was a good signing. Nimmo coming back, I liked that because how are you going to replace Nimmo was a big question on the offensive side. And now you replace him by just keeping him. So I think that was good. The Jeff McNeil extension was amazing. I love that deal at the
Yes.
end of the offseason. So
Yes.
so all that I loved. As far as the new additions, I think the rotation, Verlander and Senga, to me, I think you feel better about, like I've already kind of talked about, getting the health of Verlander compared to deGrom. I think Kodai Senga in a playoff series has a chance to be better than a Chris Bassett was. So I like the way they reshuffle that. I think David Peterson's going to step up in that rotation a lot this year as well. So I think the rotation's good. The bullpen, I mean, you could say they lost Diaz, but they went into the offseason with just Drew Smith on the roster. So you bring in Adam Ottavino and Brooks Raley, or bring back Ottavino, bring in Brooks Raley, sign David Robertson, who's probably going to close with Edwin Diaz out. He's got a lot of closing experience. They did a good job bringing in a lot of depth. They really filled out their bullpen and their rotation. And as far as the lineup, they didn't do much, but Narvaez was a guy that they signed as a Venezuelan catcher who's the perfect mentor for their top prospect, a Venezuelan catcher, Francisco Alvarez. So I think that's going to show up in a lot of ways. And then, the Tommy Pham edition was the last thing that they did. It's probably the only signing I didn't really like. I feel
Right.
like I would have been happier if they kept that roster spot open for one of the prospects to rest the service. And Pham hasn't been great the last couple of years, but overall, not a lot of complaints when your team spends and is as aggressive as the Mets were.
Right. Right. What are your thoughts on Senga? Because I've watched him pitch in spring, and I'm trying to look at how the batters react to his pitching and how much contact they're making. And I mean, he's killing dudes like,
Yeah,
and that
he's
ghost
nasty.
whatever fork ball. So to me, I mean, he's major league ready. What are your
Oh,
thoughts?
for sure. I mean, he's gonna be, technically they're gonna have him slated as the four starter, and that's just because there's more off days in the schedule, so you can get him more rest throughout the year by doing that. But he's your three in this rotation, and he's really good. He was dealing with a finger issue because of that split. And so last outing, he just goes like fastball, cutter, slider without his best pitch and is carving dudes.
Yeah.
So that tells me that his stuff is really good when he gets that ghost fork back into play. He's going to strike out a lot of batters this year. He's going to be, I mean, he's a pretty sneaky, not even sneaky, really. He's got to be one of the favorites for rookie of the year. It's him, it's Corbin Carroll for the Diamondbacks, but he's going to be in that rotation every fifth day. So, or I guess for him, maybe it's once a week, but regardless, we're going to see probably 25 starts of this guy.
Right.
He can make a huge impact.
Right. Right. And another thing that I noticed when he's pitching is when he does start getting hit or whatever because of a home run, he recovers quickly. It doesn't. You could tell it doesn't dwell. He doesn't dwell on like his mistakes or anything, which is good.
Yeah.
That shows maturity, like a lot of maturity. So let's get into like the injuries because this is going to factor into like the depth part of the Mets, right? So unfortunately, we lost Diaz, and I wanted to ask you about that too because I heard that game that he closed out, he might have tweaked something, and then the jumping up and down after the celebration is what kind of screwed him up. Did you hear
Yeah.
anything about that?
Not necessarily that. I did hear that, it was the celebration where, ultimately the tear took place, which is unfortunate. And, it's one of those things now where you're hoping that he can come back at the end of the season, but there's every chance that we just saw kind of the last of Diaz this year. So, it's an unfortunate injury, but, actually it could have happened anytime, right? So, it is what it is at this point. Luckily, they have some guys to fill in.
Right. It reminded me of the Kendrys Morales. I don't know if you remember that
I
Kendrys
don't know if I
Morales
remember that
injury.
one.
Kendrys Morales was like the switch hitting like Cuban born player, powerful guy. And he wound up hitting a home run, and then they were waiting for him at the plate, and then he jumped on the plate and slipped, and then his career
Oh
was,
yeah,
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 yeah. And it sucks
yeah.
because I mean, it didn't happen while he was playing. It happened him celebrating. You know what I mean?
It's,
Um,
it's a lot of crazy injuries. I remember Sean Rodriguez when he had
right.
punched the Gatorade cooler and broke his hand.
That's another one. Yeah. So with Diaz gone, obviously you have to have people step up. So who do you think steps up in the place of Diaz? Who's their closer now that Diaz is not with us?
It's David Robertson.
Okay.
He saved 25 games last year. He's closed for the Yankees before. Still a really effective pitcher despite his age. So I think he's kind of the clear cut guy. Adam Ottavino will get some opportunities. They'll mix it up if it's not working. But I think David Robertson is the closer this year. And honestly, I think that's fine. I just wonder. I'm less concerned about the closer spot and the fact that they don't have Robertson now in the 7th, 8th inning spot. So it's more, who's going to step up alongside him and Ottavino now? You need some more arms to kind of fill in the gaps.
Right. There's a pitcher that just went down that I really like, Montes de Oca.
Yeah.
I just see him being special down the line. He's got this nasty ass pitch that goes from the inside to the outside that I
Yeah.
didn't see him use really even last year when he was pitching for us. And he's a big dude too. I'm just mad that he went down. I think he would have helped us out.
I
But when he
think you'll
does
see
come
him
back,
this
yeah.
year. Yeah, you'll see him this year. He's got a chance. I mean, the question is, can he throw strikes? But if he throws that thing over the plate, it's going to be damn hard to hit. So
Right, it's nasty.
yeah,
And I see him as possibly a future closer. Maybe
he
not for
could be.
us, could be. So another thing with the injuries, Jose Quintana. Now I'm not really worried too much about him, but what do you think with him going down and David Peterson specifically this spring just being unhittable? Do you think he's taking Quintana's spot essentially?
I hope so. They've kind of made it seem like a competition between him and Gill. But if it was a competition, Peterson
It
won that competition.
is there a competition? You know what I mean? That's the
Yeah, I
question.
mean, he's been, I think it's one hit, no earned runs in the entire spring. And he was great last year. I mean, people don't really realize how good he was. Pitching in an inconsistent role in the bullpen, back in the rotation, back and forth. And he found a way to be really successful. So yeah, I mean, this guy, I think that if you look at the future of the Mets rotation, not to say David Peterson's the ace, but he's the guy that's under control that I think can be a number 3 starter for the next 5 years. So that's important to have, especially when you're spending 86 million on the top 2 guys in your rotation right now.
What do you think he's doing different? What do you think clicked for him differently this spring as opposed to in the past? Was it more like a youth thing? Maybe he was young back then and now he's more mature. Like, what do you think
Yeah,
clicked?
I think David Peterson went into this spring knowing that you know originally he might have been pitching out of the bullpen. Who knows? All he could control is himself in that situation. Quintana goes down, an opportunity opens, and he was not going to let anyone else kind of grab it. He came with his best stuff in spring training, and if you're a starting pitcher as talented as he is, and you're facing hitters that are kind of cold, you're going to carve them up. Now, that's not to say that David Peterson's going to pitch to a 0 ERA this year. Guys are going to hit him, but the difference in him now is I think he's got the experience under his belt. He knows that he's got to execute his game, and his game is damn good with the fact that he's 6'6". He's a big guy.
Yep.
That fastball has ticked up. It's now at 94. That comes in pretty hard for hitters. He's worked that fastball up in the zone. His slider is nasty. It was one of the most effective sliders in baseball last year. Batters basically swung and missed at that pitch, over 40% of the time. I think it was in 47% of the time. So he's got an arsenal to get swings and misses, to get strikeouts, and that's going to allow him to be very successful in the league this year.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree, man. I think he's always had the talent. He probably either didn't realize it or he just was getting in his own way. And I think right now something clicked and he's like, yeah, I think he realizes probably might be his last chance, you know?
A former first round pick, I mean,
Yeah.
I think he's kind of announced himself that I'm a starting pitcher in the big leagues and I deserve a spot in this rotation. And If he's great to start the year when Quintana comes back, I mean, he's going to hold on to that spot and they'll have to figure out a way to work Quintana in somewhere. But those things work themselves out most times. Someone else will
Yeah,
get hurt.
because to
But
me he was very similar in the when we first called him up and everything. He's very similar to like Mats. That's what worried me about him is that Mats has mega talent, but just can't put it together. And he was kind of like on that. And I feel like hopefully this year he's going to be able to do that.
yeah,
So with depth, every team wants depth, and depth is great, especially if the depth contributes. Even with these injuries, right, and being able to fill these holes, are you satisfied with our depth? And what else do you think we might need or have to add?
I think their depth is pretty strong. The rotation beyond the five guys that they're probably going to roll with, you still do have McGill as an option. You have Joey Lucchesi, who's coming off Tommy John. He's an option. They just signed a Dylan Bundy to throw probably in Syracuse. So I think that they're doing well on depth. They're doing well in depth in the bullpen. I do wonder about kind of the depth of high leverage arms in that bullpen with Diaz going down. Like that's one area to keep an eye on. You're going to need a Montes de Oca. You're going to need Drew Smith. You're gonna need one of these guys to step in. Beyond that, I think looking at their lineup, it's just how many impact bats do they have? Is Daniel Vogelback as good as he was last year? That's a question to be answered. When do we see the kids come up? But uh, assuming everyone kind of plays their potential, I think they're a pretty complete team. I really do.
Yeah, I agree as well. My only issue with with the Mets, like if I had to pick a player, and it's not to pick on them per se, is Vogelback. He's got power and he makes contact, but to me, he's a base clogger, and I don't think the Mets need someone like that. I mean, and then I think like a player like that forces you to make certain moves and decisions you really might not want to make. So, for instance, like if Vientos was the DH and he gets on base, you're not worried about him clogging up the bases. You don't have to put in a pinch runner and waste a player. But with Vogelback, you kind of do. You know what I mean? So you kind of more like riding on the fact that, oh, Vogelback comes up. If he hits a home run, you don't have to worry about that. He puts a run on the board. You don't have to worry about the bases being clogged. But, he's not going first to third on a base hit. So you're going to have to put a pinch hitter, especially in those crucial moments towards the end of a game or something. So, I mean, as much as he may be a great person, I just don't feel like he's a good fit for the Mets. Like,
Well,
at least
I
not right now,
will,
you know?
I, so I will say he did show up to camp, lost a little bit of weight. Uh, you'd be surprised that guy, he's not going to steal any bases, but there's like sneaky athleticism.
Right.
He's like, if you tell, I don't think that the difference between him and Mark Vantos running first or third is as great as it should look, is what I'd say.
Okay, okay.
Ultimately, my problem with Vogelback is similar to yours in the sense that a lot of his value is getting on base and he draws a lot of walks. You want him driving the baseball more than he did last year. If Vogelback is hitting 18 home runs and getting on base at a 370 clip, and I could trade that for him getting on base at a 330 clip and hitting 30 home runs, I want more power out of him. I think that it'll probably work itself out. If the prospects are as good as they should be, you could see Alvarez getting some DH time. You could see Vientos. You could see Beatty. I mean, outside chance of Mauricio. I think that it could be sorted out. But for now, he's a lot better option than JD Davis and Dominic Smith were at the start of last season. So
Right.
in that sense, it's an upgrade.
I got you, brother. I hope he proves me wrong. I want him to
Yeah.
prove me wrong, actually. All right. So you did a show Friday with Jordan Grossman on the top prospect list. And this is what I love about you, Ryan. This is what makes me like always tune into your show, is that you don't follow the status quo. You kind of go against the grain, but not on purpose. Like if it's legit, you'll go against the grain. And I've always thought that Brady was the top prospect, always from the beginning, even over Alvarez. And here's why: because with Alvarez, you have all these comps that they make. He hits like he could be a Miguel Cabrera. He got like 40 plus home run power, all this stuff, right? So everybody's focused on him. They got all this fantasies, but nobody really talks like that about Beatty. But he's proven himself in the minor league time and time again. I mean, he's gotten better. So has Alvarez. I'm not knocking Alvarez. I'm just saying, like, as a complete player, I feel like Beatty's more complete because he may not be a Gold Glove third baseman, but he can play there. He's average at least. Alvarez still has to work on his defense, you know. So give me your idea of why you think Beatty's the better. If it's not the same as mine, but just give
Yeah,
me your idea of why you think Beatty's the top prospect, the
yeah,
real top prospect.
it does echo yours a little bit. I mean, ultimately, at times, I think prospect rankings, it's kind of like, when you draft a quarterback first, but the quarterback's not necessarily the better player. Where at times, because a player plays catcher or shortstop, they get kind of a notch up in rankings, which is fine. And I understand that an all-star two-way catcher is more valuable than Beatty could ever be because there's a lot of third basemen. You look at the Mets, like Vientos could play third one day, Mauricio could play third one day. So I understand why people put the catcher first, but to me, I am pretty confident that Brett Beatty is going to be an above average hitter. And I'm not entirely confident yet that Alvarez is. I like Beatty. He took the issues he had in 2021, hitting the ball on the ground too much. He lifted last year. He got so much better. He was the best hitter in that league. He has proven enough to me that I say, I know this guy's going to give me good MLB at bats. Alvarez, he still has some things that they can iron out, not just the defense. He can be exposed by high heat. There's guys that can kind of blow him away up in the zone, and he's got to figure that out still. So I think there's just more room for growth on Alvarez, and I just think Beatty is the sure thing at this point. So to me, if I think that he's going to be a sure thing, above average third baseman right now that could put him in the lineup, why am I not saying that's the top prospect when this guy could be amazing this year?
Right, right. Like when you watch prospects, if you're a fan of baseball and you watch prospects, you tend to like compare them to others. It's just natural. Like, everybody's comparing Alvarez to kind of like I said, a Miguel Cabrera type hitter. To me, and your dad might appreciate this. I compare Beatty to like a Dave Magadan, but with more
Okay.
pop, because just the contact, the way the ball just like flies off of his bat. Um, and yeah, so I mean, it's weird how, like, Alvarez, because he's got the label as catcher, even though his improvements are in the defensive part, the job that he has to do, which is to catch. He still gets a notch above Beatty
Yeah.
in that respect. I never really understood that.
I
Another
will tell
Go
you
ahead.
I'll tell you a current comp on Beatty that just kind of came into my head. Not necessarily that their swings are like entirely identical, but just the contact that they can make getting on base at a good clip, kind of the decisions they make and hitting the ball really hard. Think Christian Yelich. When Christian
Yeah.
Yelich was at his best, like I think Beatty is the type of guy that can kind of one season he might pop off and hit 30, but he's consistently going to hit for a high average, get on base, and have his extra base hit. So that's a comp and kind of current baseball that I think of that I like a little bit.
Yeah, that first home run that he hit in the majors, Beatty. I mean, I thought it was a fly ball, but it
Yeah.
just kept carrying. But his swing was so effortless, and if he puts, he's gonna grow more into his body. Just imagine he's gonna create more torque in his swing. He could probably be a 30 home run hitter easily
Yeah.
as he gets older. So Alvarez getting sent down. When they interviewed him, you could tell he was disappointed, but he took it in stride. Were you understanding as to why they sent him down?
Yeah, he was the one that I have no kind of qualms with. I thought that he should go down. He's got a lot to work on still. And at 21 years old, there's nothing wrong with that. He really hasn't experienced AAA. Go down there, spend a good part of the season there, play every day, learn all you can, and then we'll see him at some point this year, I think. I mean, I think by the All-Star break, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he was the starting catcher of the Mets.
Do you see him profiling maybe in another position, or is he just a catcher for the rest
I
of his life?
No, I think he'd catch or DH. I think that we're seeing teams kind of skew, especially if you have a good offensive catcher or two good offensive catchers. But even if you have just a one really good one, keep them off their feet a little bit. It's kind
Yeah.
of doing what you wish you could have done with Mike Piazza back in the day. So I think catcher DH is probably, and he could see more time in DH early. Like it could be very similar to William Contreras with the Braves last year, where he was maybe catching a day a week and getting more time at DH.
Right. And I know it's a good problem to have, but you also have Parada in the wings. So what
Yeah.
do the Mets do then? I mean,
It's a problem when it becomes one, right? It's a
right,
problem
right,
when both of them prove that they're MLB catchers offensively and defensively, and then you can get by with it though. If the two of them are good enough hitters that it warrants both of them being in the starting lineup, they can both be in the starting lineup. Also, Kevin Parada, I mean, if you look at trade deadline assets for the Mets this year, Kevin Parada and Ronnie Mauricio are the two that I think are the most likely to be moved if they have to move a
right,
top prospect.
right. I was gonna bring up like Vientos right now and Mauricio
Him as
because
well, too. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean we have depth now, and you can't put a person in a spot that doesn't exist. So we don't have many spots left right now. So Vientos and Mauricio, what are they, and what can they become? Because we pretty much like DH, we could put anybody in DH,
Yeah.
you know?
I think, Mark Vientos is in kind of a similar spot that we've seen other Mets at, Dom Smith and J.D. Davis, where, they're good enough to be MLB hitters, but it's a matter of finding them a position in a spot in the lineup. So we'll see what happens with Vientos. I mean, I think, on the right team with the right amount of plate appearances, it's a guy that could hit 40 home runs in the big league. That's the type of power he has. But, you know, how effective is he going to be in a role? I think the best part about Vientos this year is that they still haven't answered that need to have someone who can mash against lefties. And I really think that Vientos could be that guy right now. And that could be a role for him. So if he can learn to thrive in that specific role, I mean, he could be coming off your bench this year hitting 10 to 15 home runs
Right.
against left-handed pitching. As far as Ronnie Mauricio, he's got a lot more to prove still. Vientos did it in AAA last year. Mauricio still has to go to AAA. Had great numbers in the Dominican Winter League. Started off camp hot. Got a lot of playing time at camp and still finished with an on-base percentage below 300. So you still see that there's a ton of talent there. You might say Mauricio has the most power in the system. That's over Alvarez. I mean, his
Right.
power is insane,
Yeah.
but he still has to figure out how to hit.
Yeah, he reminds me of like power wise and again effortless swing of an O'Neill Cruz from Pittsburgh. Just one
Yeah,
of those
big
that just
guys, big levers. Yeah,
right. I don't
yeah,
even think they know how much power they have. That's how much power they
yeah.
have, you know. All right. So any other intriguing prospects that we should be looking out for that might get our attention this coming season?
Well, for the big league team, I think like Jose Budo is a guy you're probably going to see, just because he's starter depth, and I think he can be solid. Like I think if he has to get 5, 10 starts this year, it'd be okay. As far as like guys to watch, like Jet Williams is an exciting prospect they just drafted, so we'll see where he plays. I'm guessing St. Lucie, and how effective he is. Alex Ramirez is always going to be interesting. Last year he got out to Brooklyn. How soon before he's in Double A? That's a guy that could be the center fielder of the future for the Mets. So they got a lot of talent right now. It's just a matter of, seeing where they slide in. As far as the big league team, though, I think it's mostly going to be the three guys we've spent all of our time talking about.
Yep, yep.
And then the occasional, you have your Montes de Oca, you have your Budo, some of those guys that'll get some run.
And then as far as like pitching prospects, because I know that Allen's down and Mets, they have a history of generating great pitchers, bringing up, really good pitchers. What do we have as far as pitching prospects outside of Allen and
Well,
Budo?
yeah, so I mean, Allen now, I mean, he's dropping because you don't know when he's going to pitch. I mean, he's probably not going to pitch this. He's definitely not going to pitch this year. Who knows when he pitches next year? Blade Tidwell is the guy they just drafted. He's really good. That's their top pitching prospect now. I imagine he starts in St. Lucie, but college arm that could rise quickly. So he's the highest upside guy to watch. Dominic Hamill had a great season last year. I think he was their pitcher of the year in the organization. Had success in low A and high A. So he's someone that I don't think you'll see this year, but potentially 2024, he could factor into the mix as far as the rotation. And other than that, they got some guys, Mike Vassell, kind of a similar place as Hamill as far as where he's going to be. Christian Scott's in the lower levels. They got it's like one of the guys. Oh, Calvin Ziegler. He was the,
Yeah,
the last guy in my top
I was
10.
gonna ask you about Ziegler because I felt like he's been with the organization for a while, you know.
Yeah, I think he was drafted in 2020, in 2019 or 2020. But out of high school, one of those guys. I think he struck out 14 batters per nine. So he struck out a lot of guys
Mm.
last year. He walked a lot of guys. So it's another of these guys you kind of have to teach how to pitch, but the raw stuff is really impressive.
Awesome, brother. So we're gonna go back and then forward a little bit because what I'm about to talk about kind of has to do with what's going on right now, what happened yesterday. Okay, so the Correa deal didn't go through because of the injury, whatever. But if we did sign Correa, that would have not created a problem for us. It would have created a problem for Beatty because Beatty's now out of a position and now has to go down to the minors and learn a new position, left field. It would have shook a lot of things up, but we didn't sign Correa. Um, so yesterday, decision was made to send down Vientos and Beatty. Um, and you kind of already were hinting on the fact that if they send Beatty down, wasn't going to be that great of a decision, and I agree with that. So talk about that, the decision to send Beatty down, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where the Mets are playing the long game here, and they know there's going to be injuries and it's going to open up time for them. And I also am not surprised with an old school manager like Buck Showalter to say, let's let these guys go to AAA and earn it, which is all fine and well. It just seems like it was kind of painted to us that there was going to be a chance in spring training. Maybe we were reading into it too much, but Beatty showed everything that you would have wanted him to show to grab that job. He showed he's good at third base defensively. I think he's a better defender than Escobar. And
For sure.
offensively, he got on base at a really good clip and showed that he can have competitive at bats. I just think that the upside is so much higher, and it's the bar that you're climbing. If like you said, Carlos Correa is there, well, no question he's starting in AAA. Eduardo Escobar, not to knock him, he finished with an above average season last year. It was carried by an amazing September.
Right.
There was about 4 months of the season where this guy was a below average player, and that's defensively and facing right-handed pitching. I think Escobar coming off the bench, facing lefties primarily as a third base DH, even mix a little bit of time at second. He's way more valuable in that role. Beatty is the most valuable third baseman they have. So I just would have figured you'd put your most talented team out there come opening day and try to win right now. They're prioritizing, keeping all the MLB veterans because they think at some point one of these guys goes down and that'll open up time for the kids. So I
Yeah.
guess it's a different philosophy on what they're prioritizing.
I know it's weird because I mean you think about it and you've watched baseball for a long enough time. So it's not like you're new to the sport. I'm not new to the sport. You figure you put Beatty at third and then you make your bench stronger by having Escobar there, or he could platoon with Vogelback. So he'll be when lefties are in, he'll be in, and then when righties are in, Vogelback will be in. So I didn't understand the decision. And then with the Vientos thing, you said it on your podcast this morning. There's nothing left for him to do in
Yeah.
AAA. Like he's just going down there just to get at bats because there's not a spot left for him. And then you take into the account they have the FAM signing, which he's not doing that great in spring. You also said it in the podcast this morning and on Friday. He hasn't had a good major league season. He hasn't really contributed to a team effectively in like 2.5, 3 years. Um, so I mean, the decision essentially focuses on Ruff and Fam on the roster. Um, how do we measure the talents of our youths if we're not giving them the opportunities that they deserve? So
Yeah.
what does this emotionally do to a person? Let's say like Beatty, because Beatty knows that's his position. He should be there. What does that do emotionally to a person like him?
Well, it's good. It's a good challenge for them still. Obviously, go down, prove it. Are you gonna wallow in it that you have to start in AAA? Are you gonna show that they made a mistake and you need to be up? So I think in that sense, I think both of them can and will rise to the occasion. I do think you kind of bring up an interesting point on Vientos because as much as it sucks for Beatty to maybe know he's the best third baseman on the team, he at least hasn't played in AAA. So at least when they say, "Hey, you haven't played in that league yet, that's one of the steps in the development process. Go play it." Okay. Mark Vientos did it last year. He spent the entire season there. And he's probably looking and comparing himself to a Darren Ruff. Be like, I'm a better hitter than that dude. He's 36. He's got arthritis in his wrist. And I'm, whatever Vientos is, 23, 24. in the prime of my life, hitting tanks all the time. Like, listen, I can be that guy right now. What are we doing here? So I think, for Vientos, we'll see how he starts the season, because if he's tearing the cover off the ball in AAA and Darren Ruff starts off 1 for 20, the cries are only going to get louder from the fan base to make a move now. And I think there's every chance that, because of the way the roster is made up, that we do see Vientos before Beatty this year. There's also the fact that if they keep Beatty in AAA until June 3rd, they get an extra year of control on him. I don't know if they care about control on Vientos as much as they probably do on Beatty.
Right, right. But again, as a fan, and I'm pretty sure you think of this as well. Last year, if we would have won just one more game, we wouldn't have been in the situation where we're giving up the division to our rivals. And so if he is going 1 for 20, Fam and Ruff, that's such a waste of time. Not to guarantee that Vientos or Beatty come in and right away they win us games, but I'm just saying, like, we're going to be thinking about those things when the season's near the end,
Well,
and let's say we're 1 or 2 games out or ahead. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's frustrating, and that's what you're gonna be thinking about. The one thing I will give the Mets credit on is it's gonna be a lot easier to punt on 3 million of Ruff, or 6 million of Fam, than it was to eat 20+ million of Cano last year. So, the fact that they did that, I imagine they will make that tough call if they have to. We'll just see. You never know. Maybe the veterans do play well to start the
Right.
season. I mean, you can't count them out. Darren Ruff does have a career of hitting left-handed
Right.
pitching. Uh, it just hasn't looked good in a Mets uniform.
Right, I got you, brother. And as much as sexy as it is to have prospects come and contribute and do things, in the end, as a fan, you just want the team to win games. You don't care how
Yeah.
we win them. We just want to win them. So let's get into, like, the season that's coming up. Uh, who will be the MVP for the 2023 Mets, and will that person could that person possibly win MLB MVP for the National League?
I think it's Francisco Lindor.
I know,
And
I know, brother. I
yeah,
heard you, brother. I heard you. Go ahead. Tell me
yeah,
why.
it's Lindor because, look, as far as most valuable in the sense of who's the most valuable hitter in the lineup, it's Pete Alonso. But most valuable to the baseball team, it's Lindor at shortstop. Yeah, the elimination of the shift. That's going to make him more valuable with his range at the position, being the best shortstop in baseball defensively. And I think that, there's still even better season than what we saw last year. If you take last year's season and you remove slamming your finger in the door of the hotel, which I think kind of slowed his numbers for a month, we could have seen 30+ home runs from Lindor, and even more production. So if there's one guy on this team that could win an MVP, it's Francisco Lindor, and I think ultimately the team goes as Lindor goes. He's got to carry them.
Okay, who do you think will be the Mets Cy Young?
That's tough.
Because you
I
have
think
at least three people that can do it. You
Yeah,
know.
I think David Pete. No, it's got to
Go
be.
ahead, say it, bro. If you want to, I'm not gonna be mad at you, bro.
No, no, no. I love my David Peterson hype train, but I'm not that crazy on it. I think it's Scherzer. But it's 1A, 1B Scherzer, Verlander. But I think Scherzer, just I think that there's going to be a healthy competition between those two, and I think Scherzer is going to rise to it a little bit more, and he's gonna be kind of the ace of the two. But I think they're both going to be awesome, honestly.
Okay, so concerning you mentioned the word healthy, the fact that we got two older pitchers. Are you concerned at all a little bit about that, the age of these two guys?
I mean, I think what I'm only concerned about isn't really the regular season. It's how much are they going to have left in the tank when you get to October. And that's what the Mets got to manage. These guys are going to want to take the ball every fifth day and throw 200+ innings. Maybe it's better to keep them at 150 apiece, and preserve them for that stretch run. So I think that's more what I'm worried about. For the regular season, I'm not really worried about these guys.
Yeah, they're competitors. So I could imagine they're gonna say no, they'll no 115, especially
Yeah.
Scherzer. He's like, no, not 150. I'm pitching when
Yeah,
it's my time to pitch. Okay, so
exactly.
my brother, predict the best that you can what our record could be, considering the improvements of our rivals, because our rivals did make some significant improvements. What do you think our record could be?
It's interesting because, I think that I'll tell you one thing for sure. I'm seeing like the over under at like 92.5 now. I think that's an easy over. I think that they're going to win in the high 90s. I really do. But last year they won 101. So if you think it's a better team, do you think they're going to win more than 101 games? It's really tough. I think the bottom line is this division is going to come down to the Braves and the Mets. I think the Phillies are going to be fighting for a wild card again. And, we'll kind of see how much that win total climbs to. But I bet you those two teams, whether it's 95 wins, 93 wins, or 103 wins, they'll be within a couple of games of each other. It's going to be tight again.
Right. This was something that I've noticed that with the Mets compared to like other teams in other divisions, like you have inter-division rivals, but for some reason, like our division, National League East, they're pests to us. Even teams like the Nationals and Marlins, they won't lay down to us. Whereas in other divisions, the White Sox could be playing, the Guardians or one of the lesser teams, and they just stomp all over them like no big deal. But for some reason, those other teams step up for us. So I don't know. It's gonna be tough. I don't see it being like an easy, ride to the top.
Yeah. Of
Last thing, do you see us being World Series champs this year?
course. Of course I do. We're in
Got you.
March.
I got you,
If you're not
brother.
saying if you're not saying yes to that question in March, what kind of fan are you? Of course
I
they're
got
winning it all this year.
They're winning it all this year, brother. All right, so thank you, bro. Just like one of your episodes, short but sweet, straight to the point. Plug where everyone can find you, and even plug your sponsors, dude. Make some money, bro. So go ahead and plug your sponsors as well.
Well, I'll just tell you, you can find me on Twitter at Finklestein Ryan. Find the show at Locked On Mets. You can find Locked On Mets wherever you get your podcasts. I also with Just Baseball, the company I write for. I got a new podcast, Who's Better Baseball. So check that out as well. It's kind of a comparative show. It's as simple as the title. Every episode we break down who's better, whether it's two teams, two players. So it's a fun new show. So you can check that out as well.
Where's that going to be at?
It's everywhere,
Same
man. It's
everywhere too.
YouTube,
Okay.
YouTube, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Okay. Awesome, my man. I want to see you again, brother. Towards
Yeah,
the end
for
of the
sure.
season, so we can talk about the playoffs. When we make the playoffs, and then if we win the World Series, I'm definitely gonna have you back so we can talk about that, even if it's like a 10-minute episode.
Sounds good.
But thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for spending time with me, and I'll see you in a few months, brother.
Sounds good, man. Have a good one.
All right, my man. You too, brother.
Later.
Peace.